please give me some exciting,
Okay.
encouraging news when I'm asking you about the
Okay.
giant bones that were
Okay.
supposedly found in the last
Uh,
century or 2 centuries throughout the world, in the States and in every continent.
yeah.
Is there any truth to that? Because according to the oldest newspapers from the late 19th century,
Mhm.
America was booming. The same thing, not just with gold rush, not
Mhm.
just it was booming with gold rush, but in the same fashion, it was booming with all these findings of supposedly giants,
Mhm.
skeletons and bones. And our beloved late Dr. Heiser, when he was addressing that, he said, he thought that was fake because
Mhm.
people had to make um, newspaper headlines like that would sound so much interesting that people would buy newspapers. So
Yeah.
that really made me disappointed. So I was like, okay, let me ask Becca. Maybe she has something, because I remember seeing some photos online, and then later, oh, these were like Photoshop. When you see archaeologists bending down and cleaning all these bones are actually enlarged. I'm like, dang it, too. So I was like,
Yeah.
please, Becca, give us something good.
Oh, I hate to break it to you, but okay. You first let's understand, like I said, the nature of archaeologists. We get so excited when we find stuff that's cool. We actually have some protocols in place to prevent it leaking before it's supposed to. Okay. So, on site, like the first thing that you learn is protocol is don't just take a picture of the finds and post it to your social media before it's been officially announced by the excavation. And that because modern excavations do involve like government agencies, maybe the director of the excavation will inform the government agency, and the government agency will be the one to leak the news that, hey, we found this wonderful thing. Or maybe it's the university that's sponsoring the dig. But if you've got a student that just snaps a picture and posts it on their Instagram, that is very much a no-no, and it's something that we're told in no uncertain terms is not okay. And most of the time you don't have like Wi-Fi or data out on site anyway, but we're taught that there is a process for making these finds public, but it tends to happen, especially if it's a really fascinating find, it tends to happen very quickly. um, we found last summer a beautiful marble statue on our site, and within a couple of days, the news went out, or maybe it was a couple of weeks, but it was very quickly after the discovery. The proper organizations came out with the announcement, hey, we found this wonderful Greek, well, Greek style, but Roman period, probably, but I can't say for sure because I'm not an expert in sculptural styles. But um, yes, we found this wonderful marble sculpture. So somewhere in the Greco-Roman time frame. Um, so there's a process for making finds public, but we want to make finds public because, for one thing, the whole purpose of archaeology is to educate people. And every archaeologist that I know is passionate about educating the public, whether that's within the church or just the public in general. So if they find something as awesome as a 10-foot skeleton or bigger, you better believe that they're going to have it on display at the museum. They're going to, it's going to be written about in all of the journal articles. It's going to be in all the books. It would have been talked about and presented to the public very clearly. And the fact that you can't go to Chicago, the Chicago Museum, and see it on display kind of indicates that there's nothing to display. We're not trying to keep everything hush hush. Why would we do that? Because we want our schools and our museums to get funding from the government, from the Rockefellers used to fund excavations. So you want your finds to become public so there's interest so that you can keep doing what you love to do. So I hate to break it to you, but to my knowledge, there is no giant skeleton lurking in the basement of a museum anywhere that I've ever heard of. So if I find one, I'll let you know, but sorry.
Yeah, I love watching archaeological findings and different videos. They're sometimes mixed with some mysterious stuff that people post throughout throughout the world. Um, and on different channels, these are not Christian archaeologists, but the authors of these channels who produce videos about cool findings throughout the
Yes.
world. You usually don't see them; you just hear their voice because they're
Mhm.
just narrating, making videos, and moving on. But I heard so many times that Smithsonian Museum has kept all of these giant bones, and the reason why they don't want to expose them in museums is because if they do that, they will prove the Bible is true. And of course, as a secular institution, it goes against their agenda. And when I was not that long ago, I used to believe in that. So I was younger, but not that younger. And I was
Gotcha.
like, oh yeah, it sounds like one of, even though I hate conspiracies, I was like, well, this conspiracy kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
If it's conspiracy, I don't know. So according to your understanding, there's probably nothing that Smithsonian is hiding because they never got any giant bones probably in the first place. Huh?
I think it was Ben Franklin that said, three can keep a secret if two of them are dead. So we have dozens of people who work on archaeological digs. Even 100 years ago, cameras were a thing. People would write in their journals, they would send letters home. If there had been something of that nature that was found, it would have been almost impossible for somebody to cover it up for this long. Not to mention the fact, like I said, the motive is not to cover it up, the motive is to share the knowledge with the world. And so I hear stories like that. I hear, there's all sorts of hoaxes that come up that have been debunked. And some of those old hoaxes are resurfacing because of TikTok. I've had several people send me videos that they've seen on TikTok where, this stuff got debunked in the 1980s, but we didn't have TikTok back then. So now it's a new sensational. They don't want you to know. If you hear somebody say, they don't want you to know this, but that's probably a pretty good indication that everything afterwards is just no, it's probably not accurate at all. In my experience, anyway.
Yeah, I was also disappointed a little bit. I mean, I can be too disappointed, but I was checking out this book and then I looked for the part in the Old Testament, when it comes to giants or Genesis
Mm,
6, 1 to
yeah.
4. I was like, hey, maybe they have some data that is hard to find. So maybe, Randall Price has some, insight that we don't have, and I didn't find anything. And I was disappointed. But then, like I told you earlier today, well, of course he didn't put anything because by doing that, he may have ruin his work and discredit himself as the archaeologist. The whole
Absolutely.
name, maybe people will be mocking book. And of course, as a Christian, he doesn't want just Christians to buy and read this book, but just
Mm-hmm.
anyone. So in that
Yeah.
regard, I
Mm-hmm.
also understand. But I'm just curious: is there a possibility? I mean, okay,
Mm-hmm.
maybe that's a wrong beginning of the question. Of course, there is always a possibility, but when it comes to these bones, they will have to be old thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Can bones uh, be sustained for that long, that they would still survive? Because as we know, our ancestors once when they're buried in the graves and they open their graves maybe in 50 years to, if
Mm-hmm.
they're like doing something with the cemetery, sometimes you don't even see the bones, they're like turned into dust.
Right.
So I'm
Right.
just curious, like, what are the chances for bones that will be old for thousands of years to even survive?
Well, that's a good question. So it depends on the soil acidity and the level of humidity in that climate. So if you're in a climate that has the wrong chemical composition, bones can deteriorate completely, or they can be so badly damaged that there's only like the most dense bones that are found. So that can be a problem. But also, I think, again, it goes back to our expectations. Um, when you look at, and this varies based on population, but the average person in these time periods might not have been as tall as we are. There are ways of estimating how tall people are. And so if the tallest guy is about 5'5", You get somebody who's the size of an NBA player, like, they're 7 foot, that is going to be a giant. So maybe they're not 14 feet tall, maybe they're 7 feet tall. Maybe they have that pituitary issue that causes that growth where they're just taller than the average person, but maybe it's something like that. I don't know. Now, that's not to say that there couldn't also be supernatural explanations for it as well, but like how we define a giant might not be like what they would define a giant as. So again, it's that expectation. And also, so like I said, we go back to that layer cake. That date for those remains, if they exist, will be all the way on the bottom layer. It'd be all the way at the bottom. And who knows what's out there? That's the exciting thing. This is why I used to still love Star Trek, is that sense of exploration. I used to watch Star Trek as a kid, and I blame that mostly for why I got into archaeology, because it's that anything could be out there, within reason, of course. So far, we haven't found any alien spaceships on any of the digs that I've been involved with. So, I will put that out there. But yeah, there's this sense of who knows what's next. And there's an excitement about that.